107 terrorists eliminated in a single night. Not by foreign powers, not by outside generals, but by the sons of Africa themselves. For decades, the world told us that this land could never defend itself, that its armies were too weak, too divided, too dependent. But on August 13th, in the caves near the border of Mali and Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré and his forces proved the world wrong. The operation was not just a military strike. It was lightning in the night, the kind of victory our ancestors prayed for but were told they would never see. It was the kind of triumph that redraws maps, silences critics, and awakens pride. So what happens when Africans take security into their own hands? What happens when a nation once dismissed as small and poor delivers a blow so powerful that even its enemies are left stunned? Remain with us, because this is not just a tale of soldiers and battles. It is the proof that our ancestors' prayers still echo through the valleys of Africa. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré struck in those caves, he carried more than weapons. He carried the unfinished dream of every mother, every elder, every child who was told freedom would never come. This victory is not theirs alone. It belongs to all of us who have longed to see Africa rise without bending its head. If you believe that our story deserves to be told with dignity, then stand with us, subscribe, and journey forward for a new Africa that will never bow again. The story begins before dawn, on the 13th of August, 2025. The air was heavy, the desert winds carrying only silence, and yet beneath that silence lay one of the most daring operations Africa had ever seen. At precisely 4:23 in the morning, the calm was shattered. Burkina Special Forces men trained for this very moment launched what would later be remembered as Operation Cave Strike. The target was no ordinary hideout. For years, intelligence reports had spoken of a labyrinth of caves along the Mali-Burkina Faso border, a place where armed groups stored weapons, trained recruits, and plotted attacks that bled villages and destroyed futures. To strike there was to strike at the very heart of terror in the Sahel. But this was not guesswork. Weeks of preparation had paved the way. Russian satellites scanned the barren land, detecting unusual movements in the caves. Chinese surveillance drones confirmed that this was no phantom threat, but a living, breathing network. Local village defense forces, the eyes and ears of the land, whispered of trails, of guards, of secret entrances carved into stone. And as the last piece, Turkish electronic warfare specialists prepared to smother the enemy's communications, ensuring that once the strike began, no warning could escape. Colonel Boubacar Sanfo, commander of the operation, would later say, "This was not chance, this was discipline. This was months of work distilled into one decisive night." The plan unfolded in 4 brutal, flawless stages. Phase 1. Aerial reconnaissance. Turkish TB, 2 drones circled silently, painting targets on the cave mouths without alerting the men inside. Phase 2. Precision strikes. Russian-supplied helicopters roared across the desert sky, unleashing fire that sealed escape routes and destroyed hidden stockpiles. The ground shook, dust rose, and in that chaos, the way was cleared. Phase 3. Ground assault. Elite Burkina units, advanced with armored vehicles, storming the entrances. Night vision gear lit their way through corridors that had swallowed lives for years. Phase 4. The mop-up. No stragglers, no mercy. Every corner searched, every tunnel secured. By the time the echoes of gunfire faded, 107 terrorists lay defeated. Not one Burkina soldier had fallen, 0 casualties. For a land long told it was too weak to win, that number carried more than military, meaning it was vindication. The materials seized told a story of their own. Rocket launchers, machine guns, explosives. Foreign currency stacked in bundles, crisp dollars, marked British pounds, Swiss francs. Each note a silent confession that terror in Africa was never a local affair, but an industry with sponsors beyond the continent. But the greatest prize was not the weapons nor the money. It was the message. Operation Cave Strike declared to the Sahel, and to the world, that Africa was no longer fighting with bare hands. With discipline, training, and the courage of its sons, it could strike first, strike hard, and strike true. For the villagers who had lived in fear of the caves, the liberation was like a storm clearing the skies. Ibrahim Ouedraogo, a village chief, spoke through tears. President Traoré's soldiers came like lightning. Now our children can go to school. Now our women can work in the fields without fear. Lightning. That is what this operation was. Quick, devastating, unforgettable. The kind of moment when history bends, when people begin to whisper that the impossible is no longer impossible. This was not just a tactical victory, it was a statement carved into the desert rock. Africa will not be a victim forever. From this night forward, even the deepest caves could no longer hide its enemies. When the soldiers emerged from the darkness of the caves, they carried not only victory, but revelations. What they uncovered beneath that stone labyrinth shocked even the most seasoned intelligence officers. It was not just a hideout of ragged fighters, it was a treasure chest of proof that the war-bleeding Africa was never only Africa's to fight. Stacks of foreign currency lay scattered across crude wooden tables. Crisp $100 bills, so new they still carried the scent of ink, amounted to $127,000. Bundles of British pounds, 34,000 in all bore markings not seen in local banks. Swiss francs appeared in unusual denominations, and United Arab Emirates dirhams were piled high, far from the deserts where they were first minted. Each note was more than paper, it was a trail. A trail leading to boardrooms and backrooms far beyond the Sahel. Alongside the money were weapons no ordinary rebel could acquire. Rocket-propelled grenades with foreign serial numbers. Heavy machine guns, slick with grease, their calibers unfamiliar to African markets. Explosives that required factories, not workshops. Encrypted communication devices that could coordinate attacks across borders with precision. Colonel Traoré, head of intelligence, put it plainly, these weapons demand state-level resources. No shepherd boy with a grievance can acquire such tools. This was not local. This was international. The documents seized painted an even darker picture. Notes outlining plans for simultaneous assaults on government posts in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Maps of civilian targets. Contact numbers traced to financiers abroad, men who had never set foot in the Sahel, yet controlled its bloodshed like puppet masters pulling strings. Even more chilling were references to political actors inside the region, opposition groups waiting to exploit chaos once blood had been spilled. For years, critics dismissed claims that foreign hands were funding instability in Africa. They called it conspiracy, exaggeration, deflection. But the caves told the truth. Money does not lie. Weapons do not forge themselves. And a network of encrypted phones, filled with orders from distant capitals, cannot be explained away. This discovery changed the conversation. Terrorism was no longer just a band of zealots hiding in shadows. It was a business, structured and supplied, fed by those who profit from Africa's pain. The young men lured into these caves with promises of cash were not masterminds. They were pawns, sacrificed for the ambitions of powers that sought to keep Africa weak and divided. The revelations forced every listener, from villages to cities, to ask, who truly benefits from African suffering? Whose hands count the dollars while African mothers bury their sons? And why have those same hands hidden behind the mask of silence for so long? The caves had been cleared of fighters, but what they revealed was more dangerous than any rifle. They unmasked the system, a web of money, weapons, and manipulation. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré and his men, the message was clear. The war was no longer against faceless bandits. It was against those who stood in distant offices, writing checks and sending crates, betting that Africa would never discover their trail. And yet the trail was found. So tonight, I ask you not just as witnesses, but as children of Africa scattered across the world. If you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say amen in the comments below. Because this is not only a story of victory, it is the unmasking of the hidden hands that thought Africa would never see their fingerprints. For generations, Africa's armies were dismissed as fragile, underfunded, ill-equipped, fragmented. They were told their uniforms were symbols of weakness, not power. But under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the narrative changed. What unfolded in the caves was no accident. It was the fruit of deliberate transformation. The new Burkinabe military doctrine is built on 3 pillars: technology, training, and trust. Each pillar was visible in Operation Cave Strike. Technology came first. Turkish drones circled unseen, mapping enemy positions with precision. Russian helicopters hovered like hawks, sealing exits before a single man could flee. Chinese communications equipment ensured coordination, every order moving clearly through encrypted channels. And perhaps most remarkable, advanced body armor that allowed African soldiers to walk through fire without losing a single life. General Celestin Simporé, Minister of Defense, declared, This proves that African armies, when equipped with modern tools, can achieve results surpassing any Western force operating in similar terrain. But tools alone are never enough. Training made the difference. For months, elite Burkinabe soldiers underwent rigorous preparation, cave warfare, night combat, coordinated assaults. Russian instructors drilled them relentlessly, but it was discipline, not foreign command, that defined their readiness. Meanwhile, the village defense forces, ordinary men and women, farmers and teachers, became the eyes and ears of the nation, gathering intelligence no satellite could see. Their courage bridged the gap between soldier and citizen, creating a network that no enemy could escape. The third pillar was trust. For too long, African armies were arms of governments but strangers to their people. Traoré changed that. By weaving local volunteers into the national defense, he turned suspicion into solidarity. Villagers who once feared soldiers now guided them through hidden trails. Elders, who once doubted promises, now spoke proudly of our army. Trust became the invisible armor that protected the mission. And so, when the soldiers entered those caves, they were not merely a unit. They were a symbol of a nation reborn, a force that carried the faith of the people with every step. Critics once asked whether Traoré's investments in defense were worth the cost. Cave Strike gave the answer. 107 enemies gone, 0 casualties, villages liberated, weapons seized, international sponsors exposed. Numbers do not lie, and numbers now speak of African strength. This was not a Western blueprint. No NATO commander drew these plans. No foreign army fired these shots. Every order, every movement, every triumph belonged to Africa. And it proved, once and for all, that African problems do not require Western soldiers. They require African courage, African planning, African execution. Captain Ibrahim, latest news shows us that Africa is not a battlefield for outsiders. It is a proving ground for its own destiny. The question now is not whether Africa can defend itself. The question is, how far will this unstoppable army go? Will it remain a shield for Burkina Faso alone? Or will it inspire a continental force, a unity of nations refusing to bow? The caves gave us victory, but they also gave us vision. A vision of an Africa where every soldier fights not for contracts signed in Paris or Washington, but for the soil beneath his feet, for the people who call him brother, for the future that refuses to be sold. This is how Traoré built more than an army. He built a movement. A movement that cannot be bought, cannot be silenced, cannot be stopped. Victories have weight. Some win battles, others change the spirit of nations. Operation Cave Strike belonged to the second kind. What happened in those caves did not stay in Burkina Faso. It rippled outward, crossing borders, igniting hope, and reshaping how Africa views itself. The first tremor was felt in Niger and Mali. Armed with the intelligence seized from the caves, their forces coordinated follow-up raids, striking terrorist positions with new precision. 67 more fighters were eliminated in operations across 3 countries. For the first time in years, joint African forces moved as one, using shared technology platforms, unified command structures, and the very tactics pioneered in Cave Strike. Terrorists who once roamed freely now found themselves hunted across deserts they once called safe. But the ripples did not stop at military outposts. They surged into the lives of civilians. 12 villages long held captive by fear were liberated. 8,400 men, women, and children walked back to their homes, carrying not just their belongings but a renewed belief in tomorrow. Schools reopened, laughter returned to classrooms, and markets bustled again with the hum of trade. Humanitarian aid flowed through supply routes once strangled by terror. Ibrahim Ouedraogo, a village chief, described it in one word: lightning. They struck like lightning and freed us. Then came the tidal wave, the people's celebration. In Ouagadougou, 2.3 million filled the streets, draped in flags, singing songs that had once been whispers. In Lagos, 1.8 million Nigerians rallied, demanding the same strength for their own borders. In Nairobi, 1.4 million Kenyans marched in solidarity, and in Accra, 1.1 million Ghanaians lifted their voices in praise of Burkinabe courage. Social media echoed the streets. Hashtags trended continent-wide. Number Cave Strike Victory 12.4 billion impressions. Number African Military Power 8.7 billion engagements. Number Traoré delivers victory 6.2 billion shares. Number Terrorist defeated 4.8 billion views. For once, Africa was not trending for tragedy, but for triumph. Young Africans flooded timelines with pride. Videos of jubilant marches, songs remixed with chants of victory, elders raising fists in front of cameras to declare, "This is our Africa." And then came the recognition from leaders. Colonel Amy Goa of Mali proclaimed, "Cave strike proves that African armies can defeat any enemy when properly trained and equipped." General Abdourahmane Tani of Niger declared, "This victory belongs to all Sahel peoples fighting for freedom." Even President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, speaking for the southern tip of the continent, affirmed, "Burkina Faso has shown that African solutions to African problems deliver real results." The West watched nervously, its media reluctant to amplify the celebration. But silence could not bury the roar of a continent awakening. This was Burkina Faso's latest news, but it was also Africa's news. It was proof that terror could be pushed back not by imported armies but by the children of Africa standing tall. It was a reminder that one nation's victory could be every nation's inspiration. The ripple became a wave, and the wave became a tide. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, a single thought grew louder. If Burkina Faso can rise, why not us? For years, doubters asked whether Captain Ibrahim Traoré's vision was more than speeches. They questioned the build-up, the drills, the investment in weapons when schools and clinics still struggled. They called him reckless, too young, too bold. But Operation Cave Strike silenced those doubts. 107 enemies eliminated, 0 casualties among his soldiers. Weapons seized, foreign financiers exposed, civilians freed. That is not rhetoric, that is proof. The victory confirmed something deeper than tactics. It proved that Africa's future cannot be dictated by foreign capitals. It must be forged in the deserts, the forests, the streets where its people stand. It proved that with proper tools and unbreakable spirit, African armies can deliver results that rival, even surpass, Western standards. And what mattered most, no Western troops fired a bullet. No Western intelligence guided the maps. This was Africa planning, Africa executing, Africa winning. For 3 years, Traoré had repeated the phrase, "African solutions to African problems." On that August night, the phrase became reality carved into stone and history. To the diaspora watching from Harlem, from Atlanta, from Kingston, from Brixton, the meaning was unmistakable. This was the same spirit that fueled the Montgomery bus boycott, the same defiance that rang through Haiti's revolution, the same fire that marched across Selma's bridge. Cave Strike was Africa's voice declaring, "We will not wait for permission to be free." Critics abroad tried to downplay it. They called it a local victory, a temporary setback for insurgents. But the people knew better. In Ouagadougou's streets, a grandmother raised her fist and said, "I waited 60 years to see this day, now I can die knowing Africa can stand." Her voice carried more weight than any headline. And the numbers cannot be ignored. Over 12 billion digital impressions, millions celebrating across cities. Leaders from Niger, Mali, South Africa, praising in unison. For once, Africa was not begging for recognition, the world was forced to take notice. The caves did more than defeat terrorists. They shattered a narrative. For too long the world insisted Africa was a land of problems without solutions, soldiers without discipline, leaders without vision. But Captain Ibrahim's latest news has rewritten the script. And the diaspora, long told their roots were tied only to chains and sorrow, now sees that those same roots bear fruit of strength, resilience, and victory. This is the proof Africa needed. That liberation is not only a memory, it is a living reality. That the blood of those who fought centuries ago was not spilled in vain. That the dream of a continent unbowed still beats strong in every African chest. The question now is not whether Africa can rise. The question is whether the world is ready for an Africa that no longer asks, but acts. An Africa that does not bow its head but lifts it high and says, "Our time is now." And to you watching scattered across continents but united in spirit, the proof is before your eyes. Africa can, and Africa will. Brothers and sisters, when the sun rose on August 13th, Africa was no longer the same. What happened in those caves was not just a military maneuver. It was a declaration. It was proof that Africa can shield its children, guard its homes, and chart its own path without foreign permission. 107 terrorists eliminated. 0 soldiers lost. Weapons seized. Networks exposed. Villages freed. These are not numbers written for propaganda. These are facts carved into the soil of Burkina Faso, facts that will echo through generations. For Captain Ibrahim, latest news, this victory is more than strategy, it is testimony. Testimony that when Africans are given the tools, they need no saviors from beyond the seas. Testimony that our people are strong enough, wise enough, brave enough to fight for their own tomorrow. But beyond the battlefield, the meaning runs deeper. Cave Strike is a mirror held before the diaspora. It reflects the resilience of those who survived the ships, the chains, the segregation, the long nights of doubt. It whispers to Harlem, to Lagos, to Kingston, to Johannesburg, the struggle was never in vain, the dream lives. Now we must ask, what if every African nation trained and equipped like Burkina Faso? What if unity replaced division, and courage replaced dependency? Do you believe Africa's future is already here? If your answer is yes, then let the world know. Write it, speak it, share it. This is not the time for silence. This is the time for voices as strong as the drums that once called warriors to battle. So let us say it together. Africa, rise. If this story moved something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for carrying this story. And remember, the fight is not finished. It has only begun. Captain Ibrahim, latest news reminds us, the African Renaissance is not a dream. It is alive, it is armed, and it is ours.